Episode 190 of CppCast recorded March 15th, 2019. This episode of CppCast is sponsored by Backtrace, the only cross-platform crash reporting solution that automates the manual effort out of debugging. Get the context you need to resolve crashes in one interface for Linux, Windows, mobile, and gaming platforms. Check out their new Visual Studio extension for C++ and claim your free trial at backtrace.io/CppCast. In this episode, we discuss usability improvements in GCC 9. We'll also talk more about modules. And we'll discuss little-known C++ exception handling feature. Welcome to episode 190 of CppCast, the first podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm your host, Rob Irving, joined by my co-host, Jason Turner. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm all right, Rob. How are you doing?
I am doing okay. Doing okay.
We just...
Getting by.
Getting by? Did you have any exciting blizzards come by your way this week?
No, but you did, right?
Yeah, it was a very exciting week for me because it was, I don't know. I mean, the forecast was dead on. They're like, the snow is going to start at 9 a.m. and it's going to be done by midnight. And that's exactly what happened. Like, I'm looking outside and it was raining super hard and then changed to snow and then it was whiteout conditions and it was a blizzard. And then they're like, and then the next day it will be clear. And, we actually had a special guest coming in for my meetup this week, Herb Sutter.
So that's awesome.
Yes. So that was last night. Right. Didn't want to cancel, but everything worked out pretty much how it was supposed to. We ended up with the snow and everything clearing up. The airport opened up exactly on time, exactly when everyone said it would, and the flights were moving again. There was still a bunch of delayed flights yesterday morning because there were basically not enough airplanes, right? Like, planes had gotten diverted. So, but yeah.
So what did Herb talk about at the meetup?
He gave us a sneak peek of the keynote that he will be giving at ACCU in a few weeks.
Nice.
And I don't actually know if that keynote topic is announced yet.
But you got a sneak preview of it.
Yes. I'm assuming the topic is announced, but I haven't been on the ACCU website to look. And now I can't find the website. What am I missing?
ACCU Conf or something?
No matter what I do, it's showing me weather.
That's not helpful.
Oh, there we go. Conference.acccu.org.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So do we know what Herb's keynote is, though?
Let's see. Herb Sutter is listed as a speaker.
Oh, and Kate Gregory is also keynoting.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
She is presenting at lots of conferences this year for sure.
Yeah, she is. I don't see what the topic is, though. Do you want to just tell us based on what you...
Here we go. I just wanted to make sure that it was officially announced here. It's defragmenting C++, making exceptions more affordable and usable. And it is a discussion of his proposal for statically determined exception stuff. The same thing we've had. I think Charlie mentioned it when he was on the show. Mm-hmm. Maybe Phil Nash has talked about it as well, and kind of tangentially related to the work that Niall has done with expected, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Right. Well, and since you mentioned Herb, I should mention that next week I'm going to Microsoft for the MVP Summit.
Right.
And we should have another episode out next week, but it will probably not have you because I'll probably be talking to someone in person while I'm out at Microsoft's campus.
That makes sense. I've never been to the MVP Summit. How is it?
It's a good time. And we should be learning all about Visual Studio 2019, which is coming up. And so I'll hopefully talk to a couple members of the C++ Visual Studio team about everything going on there.
It looks like it's going to be a pretty big, exciting release. Lots of work done on the compiler. Looking pretty good.
Yeah, it should be good. Okay, well, at the top of the episode, I like to read a piece of feedback. This week, we got a tweet. We actually got this tweet today from Wojciech Razik saying, "Hey, CppCast, there's a bunch of developers who are waiting for a new episode. You know, it's Friday morning in EU, and we cannot start work without it." So yeah, this episode, I'm hopefully going to get this out Friday night, March 15th, if not early Saturday morning. And yeah, we just did not have a chance to get together earlier in the week because we both had crazy schedules this week. So we decided to do this news episode kind of last minute on Friday.
But try to keep things moving.
Yeah, but we should get back to more normal scheduling after next week. Like I said, I'll be out at the MVP Summit. I will be talking to someone out there. And I think we already have a guest scheduled for the following week.
Very cool.
Yeah. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts about the show as well. You can always reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or email us at feedback@cppcast.com. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes. So today we have several articles to go over. And this first one is from the Red Hat blog, and it's usability improvements in GCC 9.
They are doing some serious updates to the way that they are reporting errors.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to jump to one of the more interesting things I found in this article, which is, the way we've been reporting errors for forever is just writing out to the command line and, just line by line statements, which, programs might need to parse. If you're, using Jenkins or something like that, you're probably parsing those errors.
I've written this code at least twice myself to parse these things.
So with GCC 9, they're making a new output format for diagnostics to output JSON.
That could be really handy.
It could be really handy. Just being able to spit out JSON, it's already parsed for you. And, it makes sense. I'm surprised no one else has thought of this earlier. It's 2019. Everyone loves JSON.
It's like a usable version of XML or something.
Yeah, exactly.
There's got to be some other compilers or tools or something that output like this. I guess I've never really thought about it, though. Maybe Rust does, maybe Haskell. I don't know, some of the other programming languages.
I mean, the author at least doesn't make note of anyone else who's doing this,
Right.
He makes it sound like it was just an idea he had while working on this. And, if Clang or Visual Studio are doing it, I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I will say for a bit of history, I was made aware of this particular article from my cousin, who was partially responsible for getting better error output from the Rust compiler a few years ago when he was working with that team.
Oh, okay.
And he saw this article come up, and it's very much related to the same kind of work that he did a couple of years ago. I mean, stylistically and everything, it's great to see this kind of thing propagating.
Yeah. Well, aside from the JSON stuff, what did you want to point out that's new and different here with GCC 9?
Just the error reporting, right? I mean, like the JSON stuff is cool. Yeah, it's gotten much better. So instead of just telling you no much for this operator and you're left wondering, well, why? What's missing here? It will actually break it down and show you this is the expression I tried to compile. This is the thing that's missing. Or it can give you better hints, like you forgot to include the string header or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, they've have several examples here showing how they've gotten much better at showing the error location.
Yeah.
And then there was also some changes with how they report vectorizing, and if they're not able to vectorize some code, they'll give you more clear, I guess not errors, but notes on why they weren't able to vectorize something.
Yeah.
And that looks like it could be handy.
Yeah, those are interesting ones. And sometimes, I was recently playing with some of the optimizer diagnostic output from Clang, which I've looked at several times over the last few years. And I don't know, a few years ago, I felt like, oh, this is readable. But now it keeps giving me so much more information that now I'm now I don't understand what it's trying to tell me anymore.
Right. Okay. Is there anything else you want to mention before we move on?
I don't think so. The fix-it hints are interesting. Oh, yeah. Hopefully more compilers will be able to, or IDEs will make use of these things too.
Yeah, and speaking of, if you want to test this out, you can already get it on Godbolt. Just select GCC trunk.
Yes, and that's a good point in general, is if you look on CppReference.com, any C++ 20 feature that is currently listed as having support in GCC 9, you can play with on godbolt.org, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Very good stuff. Okay, this next article is one of those ones that will make you scared.
Yes.
So this is from the MIT Technology Review, and it is titled Triton is the world's most murderous malware, and it's spreading. And you may have heard about some of this. I know I follow politics a bit, and I think I heard about some of the stuff they're mentioning in this article. And it's talking all about malware getting into like safety systems in utility companies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And how this malware could be used to critically disrupt those systems and, cause real harm. It's not just like some malware that will steal some people's data. And obviously those people, it's really tough to lose your data and get hacked into, but this could kill people. It's scary.
Yeah.
And I think they pointed to one example, at least, where they're saying there were hackers who went into what kind of company was it in Ukraine right before Russia attacked, right?
I don't know. Let's see. Against
Something
physical...
about that. Yeah, Russian hackers in 2016 striked at Ukraine's power grid.
That's... Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that stood out to me on here is it says that part of how they were able to make use of this malware is by finding a 0-day vulnerability, unknown bug in the firmware for this safety hardware system. Safety check. What is it called? Disable safety systems design. Okay, so it's a particular piece of hardware that's designed to, have safety systems, right? But there's a 0-day vulnerability in it. And one of the things that just becoming more and more important I'm noticing as I am teaching is telling people to run fuzz testing against their products. Because you don't know. Like, you might be thinking, I'm writing this piece of software for a controlled environment. It's going in a factory. No one will have access to that network. Right. But someone does gain access to the network, and then they start sniffing the network, looking for devices that they might hack, find your device that you thought was always going to be in a controlled environment, and now it's no longer in a controlled and trusted environment. They send a few, rogue packets at it and have gained access to the device somehow by exploiting some Stack Overflow or something. So, you have to do, I believe if you accept input from anywhere, that doing some kind of fuzz testing is absolutely critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about this article. I mean, I don't think any of this is really C++ specific, but, we all need to be thinking more and more about security these days. It's can be a scary world we live in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, next one we have is from PVS Studio, and it's counting bugs in the Windows calculator. I think we may have mentioned last week that Microsoft open sourced the calculator app.
I just briefly mentioned it, it didn't end up in the news officially or anything.
Right. So PVS Studio, we've gone through a couple of these articles that they've done, which are pretty cool, where they just go through an open source project and using their analyzer find a bunch of bugs. And yeah, some of these are surprising that you would find some of these in an app that, literally everyone who's used Windows has probably used.
Right.
I mean, it's almost as, widely used as Notepad, I would imagine, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I pop up the calculator app all the time.
Yeah. And some of them, yeah, I'm surprised. Like, there was one where they're doing a character array and comparing it to, another
character literal.
Character literal instead of doing a string comparison, or using WCSMP to do the comparison, and that would never work.
Yeah. And it's kind of fun, but I think the biggest one of the biggest surprises to me is that it does support the C++ CLI, C++ CX extensions from Microsoft as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm familiar with C++ CLI and CX. I guess most of it is going to be normal looking C++. I wonder if they just kind of ignore some of the syntax if they, run into it, and they just don't try to find bugs with there. I'm wondering how extensive their support is for CLI and CX.
To be perfectly honest, I don't even know what the difference is at all, except if I see a caret after a type, then I know that it's not normal C++. Other than that,
if you're newing an object with C++ CLI and you're newing a managed object, you're using GC new.
Okay.
It's garbage collected new.
That sounds exciting.
Yeah. But there aren't a lot of very obvious differences between C++ CLI and pure C++.
Okay. And I know PVS Studio has been a sponsor of the show.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't pick this article because they were a sponsor, just for the record, but I thought some of these things were fun. And also, just kind of interesting. Microsoft open sources a project and then immediately the entire world pounces on it. I mean, it's the calculator, right?
Right.
But there's a lot of interesting checks in here where it can find like copy paste bugs and stuff, and it's looks like a pretty good tool.
Yeah, definitely. Was there any other like specific bugs you wanted to point to?
There was one of them that I was really impressed that it found. I'm going to attempt to find it right now. It's two different functions that have two different names, but the exact same body, and so it was able to warn that these functions are probably written incorrectly.
Oh, convert and convert back?
Yeah, that's what it was. Like, I'm impressed.
Yeah.
It makes you a little afraid sometimes, like if, to all our listeners out there, theoretically that's who we're talking to right now anyhow, right?
Right.
If you've never run a static analysis on your project, or if you are just using default warning options like WAL or something on GCC, or W3, like that's, I think, is the default on a new project on Visual Studio today, and then you turn some of this stuff on, it can be scary.
Yeah.
You're like, how has my project ever worked?
Right. Everyone should definitely use some static analysis. PVS Studio is definitely a great option, but there's plenty of other ones out there too.
Yeah.
Everyone should use one, at least one.
Yeah.
I want to interrupt the discussion for just a moment to bring you a word from our sponsors. Backtrace is the only cross-platform crash and exception reporting solution that automates all the manual work needed to capture, symbolicate, dedupe, classify, prioritize, and investigate crashes in one interface. Backtrace customers reduce engineering team time spent on figuring out what crashed, why, and whether it even matters by half or more. At the time of error, Backtrace jumps into action, capturing detailed dumps of app environmental state. It then analyzes process memory and executable code to classify errors and highlight important signals such as heap corruption, malware, and much more. Whether you work on Linux, Windows, mobile, or gaming platforms, Backtrace can take pain out of crash handling. Check out their new Visual Studio extension for C++ developers. Companies like Fastly, Amazon, and Comcast use Backtrace to improve software stability. It's free to try, minutes to set up, with no commitment necessary. Check them out at backtrace.io/CppCast. Okay, next one. I really like this article. There's another one from Vector Bull. I think we talked about one of his last week as well, which is also on the topic of modules. And
we should get this author on at some point, yeah?
We should. I don't know his actual name, do you?
No.
I just know Vector
I feel like
Bull.
I'm supposed to, but...
Yeah. Might try to see if he has an about page here. But this is Understanding C++ Modules, Part 1. Hello, Modules and Units. And, we've talked about modules so much on the show, but I feel like after reading through this article, I understand them a bit better now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this goes into details about, how you export a module, how module partitions work, what the difference is between, an implementation unit and what was the other thing that it could be? There were different types of module units.
Implementation partition, interface partition.
Right.
Module partition. I have to be perfectly honest, I didn't get all the way through this one either, but through this article, I mean.
Well, I thought it was a really, really good one. He's got a bunch of pretty simple code examples where he shows different ways that you can export and import modules. If you have lots of code, you can split it up into these partitions. So the partitions are not going to be like, his example is using these speech functions. So a module partition isn't going to be like speech.english and speech.spanish, but it's actually speech semicolon English and Spanish. And
okay.
You would, when you import, you would never write import module speech semicolon English. it'll take care of that for you. You just import module speech, and it'll gather up all of those partitions and import them all.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. But I was definitely not aware of how that could work before reading this.
Yeah.
And I think he also goes into how, with other languages that use modules, we're used to seeing something like, stud.vector as an import maybe. And that's not what we're going to have with C++. Like the dot is a meaningless thing with our modules.
Yeah, multiple identifiers separated by optional dots.
Right.
But it's all still just one string.
Right. But if you want to split up if you're making a library and you're exporting them as modules, you could definitely follow that as a naming convention. It's just not like enforceable.
Right. I was also stood out to me, and I think I've seen someone else mention this, but some of the import is still used even for older things. Like even if like today, IOStream or whatever is not going to be a module when we get C++ 20, you can still use import angle bracket IOStream angle bracket.
Yeah. I was a little confused about that one. So is it still doing the same thing as just an include?
I think it effectively has to, but to be fair, yeah, I'm not 100% sure either.
Right. Okay. But yeah, I was really pleased to read through this article. I feel like I definitely learned a bit more about modules, and I'll have to keep looking for the rest of his series. I don't think he said how many parts he plans on writing, but this is part 1.
Yeah, this is part 1. And I guess for our listeners who haven't been paying attention, his articles keep coming up, right? It was January, C++ modules might be dead on arrival. We discussed that one. And then in March, are C++ modules dead on arrival? That was immediately after Kona.
Yep.
And now, a week later, understanding modules. Basically, like, what did we get? Because the author's finding that most people have a misconception about what authors are and what they will give us.
Right. Okay, next one is modern CMake examples. And I know we talked a while ago about how someone was going to put together a set of CMake examples. Is this the same person? Do you know?
I don't know. It's a username on Twitter that username on GitHub that I recognize. I'm not sure. But this is quite the collection.
Yeah, so he starts off by just having a great collection of other CMake articles and documentation, even some YouTube posts and Stack Overflow Q&As, all on the topic of CMake.
Yeah,
right?
All on the topic of CMake.
Yeah, but then he also has a whole bunch of examples. Did you go through many of these examples? You know a lot more about CMake than I do.
Yeah, I clicked on a few of them, and I saw some of the comments on Reddit. I think the actual link that we have for this one is, the Reddit link. Then that links to the GitHub page. But people in the Reddit comment like, I could never figure out the right way of installing a header-only library. Thanks for that. So if you look in here, there's like 2 articles on creating and consuming header-only libraries from like 2 different authors. So it's all collected in one place. Some of these things, I think, relatively old, over a year old, as the community was really starting to build awareness of the fact that we can be using CMake better. So it's great to see them all in one place.
Yeah, looks like it's a really good collection of resources. And on the topic of CMake, version 3.14 is now available for download. And it looks like there's a couple changes they made that are worth talking about. They're deprecating support for Windows XP and Vista.
Yeah, I saw that and I'm like, I did not know that you still supported XP. But to be fair, for a build tool, you probably want as long a life as you can squeeze out of it.
Yeah, it makes sense. And while they're deprecating support for that, they're also adding support for a Visual Studio 2019 base generator. And that's based on the Preview 4, since the official release is not out yet.
Right. That'll be handy. And you skipped right over the support for cross-compiling for iOS, tvOS, and watchOS using simple toolchain files. Last time I had to do iOS development, I wish I wasn't doing iOS development.
The CMake support was that bad just for iOS?
No, there was trying to even use CMake would have been basically impossible. Like, you had to use Xcode. Really? And I swear, every time I came back to that project, because I was working on it as a contractor, it'd be like once every 3 months or something. Every time I came back to that project, I had to delete and recreate all of my keys from scratch every single time. And it would take me like an hour to 2 hours to get the project so that I could copy it to my, at the time, iPod Touch to test it. And I found it so incredibly frustrating. If I could have had a build system that I felt like I was in more control of, I would have been very happy.
It's been a long time since I wore the build engineer hat, but I used to work on a cross-platform project that we didn't use CMake, but we used Visual Studio as our main environment, but we worked on Android and iOS as well. And we would modify the iOS project based on, if we added a new file in Visual Studio. And so I'm somewhat familiar with the layout of the Xcode project files, and it is a mess.
So let me get that right. So if you added something in Visual Studio, now would you try to do that in an automated way? You would parse the Visual Studio project and then insert that into the iOS project.
Exactly.
That sounds both better than doing it by hand and terrifying and terrible at the same time.
Yeah, you're right. It was definitely terrifying and terrible. But it was better than having to maintain all three separately.
So at the moment,
been using CMake, but we were not.
Are the projects you work on today multi-platform?
Yes, but not as cross-platform as the previous stuff I was working on. That project was almost 99% shared C++ code, and you just needed a different build environment for each platform. What I'm working on now, the application layer is different, and we share common libraries. Do
you use CMake or whatever?
I'm not currently using CMake, but I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just curious. All right.
Is there anything else you want to talk about with 3.14 though?
There's a couple of random things here that stood out to me, and I feel like I don't fully immediately understand the implication here, but it made me go, oh. Install targets command, learn how to install to an appropriate default directory for a given target type based on system variables, basically. That's interesting. I'm going to have to play with that, because sometimes, depending on the nature of your CMake project, the glue that you write for installs to work correctly on multiple platforms is almost as complicated as the actual building, right? And with modern CMake, maybe more complicated to pick all the right directories and everything. So that I'm curious about. And then I also noticed that that's the little appreciated command line tool. If you have a CMake project and you type CMake to actually generate a build file for whatever generator you want. So if you're on Unix, you can say GNU makefile or makefiles or Ninja. And if you're on if you're on Windows, you might generate Visual Studio or GNU makefiles if you want to compile from one of the GNU Unix environments on Windows, right? Or you might say, I want an Xcode generator or whatever. So you can do CMake to configure the project, then CMake -- build, and it will run the appropriate build command regardless of what generator you just chose. And that's really, really helpful if you're writing build scripts for your CI or something. You don't have to think about what environment am I currently on. Just do CMake -- build. And it usually does exactly what you want it to do. Sometimes choosing how to pass the number of parallel builds that you want to run can be a little weird, because if you're on Unix, it might be CMake -- build space -- space -J7, because you want to patch the -7 to the make command. If you're using make, if you're using Ninja, it will automatically use all the cores on the system. So anyhow, the -- build command learned -v. So you can have it generate verbose build output when you want that.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes you want that. If things are going wrong at link time, you need to see the verbose output and be like, oh, it's missing that .a file right here. I see what went wrong. It's rare, but sometimes you need that. And otherwise doing that from the command line is setting an environment variable to say verbose = 1 and then running make.
Yeah, that sounds like it should be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the next one we have is Introduction into Logging with Loggeroo. Loggeroo. And this is a header-only logging library that I don't think I've heard of before.
I have not.
Yeah, but it looks like it's pretty easy to set up and use. And looks like it's a pretty easy to use logging library.
Yeah, and it uses format. It's coming. The future is here. We will know how to actually write formatted output safely in C++ soon.
Yeah, that'll be nice.
Now, did this example bother you at all? The first 3 lines of it bothered me slightly, Rob.
Yeah, include logger HPP and then include logger CPP. Why are they doing that?
I'm assuming so that you can use it in header-only mode versus possibly you could compile them separately, or you could do it this way in header-only mode. But I just like something about saying #include a CVP file.
Yeah, I don't like it.
I don't like it, right? But there's technically nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess not.
But yeah, otherwise it looks like a nice, clean, simple logger.
Yeah, one thing I liked about this one is it gives you the output includes the thread name or ID, which is something that's probably pretty handy to have.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last one we have is about a C++ feature that I was definitely not aware of, function try block. And at first, the first example is using a try and catch block with, the main function, but without any, brackets around main. So you just have int main immediately followed by a try, and then, the try block and the catch block. And I definitely didn't know you could do that. And he kind of points out, there's really no reason why you would want to do that. It's effectively the same as just writing int main brackets and then the try catch inside those brackets.
For main, yeah.
Right. But then he points out, in addition to using this for a function, you can use it for a constructor, which I was definitely not aware of.
It is the only way to catch an exception thrown during the construction of a member variable.
Right. Very interesting. Now, what's worth pointing out is even though using this, you can catch an exception that happens during the construction, but you can't actually recover from the exception.
Right. It's required to automatically rethrow it, right?
You either don't do anything, in which case it'll rethrow the same exception for you. But if you want to throw a different exception from your constructor try catch block, then you could throw a different exception, but you have to throw something. Yeah.
Right. Now, one thing on here that I never even crossed my mind was in the main example that you started with, the author sounds like would like it if that try block around main would be able to catch an exception throwing during the initialization of static objects.
Oh.
But it doesn't. It doesn't do that. But when I saw that potential example, I'm like, oh, ooh, that would be really cool. But no, it's not an option. Yeah. The other thing that I saw is I'd never considered putting it on a destructor. Now, granted, if you throw an exception during destruction, you probably have other problems in your code.
Sure.
But I have written code, perhaps ill-conceived code, where this would have actually potentially been useful to me because it was possible that my destructor could have thrown an exception.
Okay.
It was a parser, and I was using RAII technique. So at the end of the parsing, I would call the destructor, and any remaining tokens would be handled at that moment. So it was like processing a token stream. But if processing those in the rest of those tokens meant an invalid parse input, then I was trying to throw an exception during my destructor, and that got really nasty. And then I looked at this and I wondered, maybe that could have cleaned up that situation. Or maybe it was just an ill-conceived idea in the first place.
We should mention, a good use case for doing this, for adding a function try block to your constructors would be, for logging purposes. So you could log, why this object is failing to construct, that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's all we have for today, right, Jason?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, next week I will be out in Seattle, and I'll be talking to some Microsoft folks, and then we'll be back the following week with a regular episode.
And if I could make just like 2 random announcements.
Sure.
In April here coming up, I will be speaking at the Munich C++ users group. Now, there's already, it's full, but you can still check it out. Put your name on the waiting list if people cancel or whatever. That's April 11th in Munich. And then, obviously, Core C++, I'll be speaking, giving the keynote there. We've mentioned that a few times. So that's Tel Aviv coming up in May, which feels awfully soon to me at the moment.
Yeah, it does. This year is going by real fast.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening in as we chat about C++. We'd love to hear what you think of the podcast. Please let us know if we're discussing the stuff you're interested in, or if you have a suggestion for a topic, we'd love to hear about that too. You can email all your thoughts to feedback@cppcast.com. We'd also appreciate if you can like CppCast on Facebook and follow CppCast on Twitter. You can also follow me at Rob W. Irving and Jason at Lefticus on Twitter. We'd also like to thank all our patrons who help support the show through Patreon. If you'd like to support us on Patreon, you can do so at patreon.com/cppcast. And of course, you can find all that info and the show notes on the podcast website at cppcast.com. Theme music for this episode was provided by podcastthemes.com. At cppcast.com. Theme music for this episode was provided by podcastthemes.com.